Hello everyone, alt-rock enthusiast 826 here. Today I'll be ranking the deaths from What Remains of Edith Finch. These demises will be ranked by a 1 to 5 scale that displays sadness for how heartbreaking the death was, creativity for how the moment was executed, and truthfulness to what actually happened. During editing, I realized that I said Odin was killed by a dragon. It was actually Sven who was killed by a dragon. So whenever I say Odin was killed by a dragon, I mean Sven. Odin died from drowning trying to transport the house over to the new island. Molly. Molly is the first death we encounter in the game. Molly goes to bed without dinner one night, eats decorative items that look like food, turns into a cat, and goes on an adventure, and whenever she eats an animal, turns into another animal. Eventually, she becomes a monster on a ship, killing everyone on board, before going through a sewer system into Molly's bedroom, killing her before the sun rises. Molly was born in 1937, and died in 1947. I give this 3 points on the sadness scale. This entire situation could been avoided if she had something to eat before bed. It was neglectfulness by Edie. She was just a child after all. She wouldn't have known that consuming decorative berries and toothpaste were poisonous in large amounts. I'm gonna give it 5 for creativity. It really tells how Molly saw the situation unfold in her last hours of being alive. This gets a 1 for truthfulness, because Molly actually died of poisoning, not being eaten by a monster. Odin. Odin was the first listed character on the family tree. His death occurred when he tried to bring the old house across the sea with him to an island. However, this did not go as planned, and it sent Odin and the house to the bottom of the ocean, killing him. Odin was born in 1880 and died in 1937. I give this a 1 for sadness. It was a bold move to try and bring your massive house on a boat with you. It also wasn't told in video fashion, instead being pictures from a new slideshow show. I give this a 3 for creativity. Of all things for someone to die to, no one expected the developers to make Odin die by drowning trying to bring his house over to an island on a boat. I give it a 5 for truthfulness. It was the truth. Odin did drown. Nothing more, nothing less. Sven, the builder of the new and current Finch house. Sven loved building, even though it came back to bite him twice. Once, during Halloween 1960, Sven got his hand sliced up by a table saw, having him to be rushed to the emergency room. Unfortunately, the next one, he did not make it out alive. Sven died trying to build a dragon-shaped slide. I give this a 5 for sadness. Why? Well, there's probably a detail you didn't know about Sven's death. Sven was building the dragon slide for Walter on his 12th birthday. Like, just imagine being in Walter's shoes. You see your sister die right in front of you. Your brother, Calvin, dies from falling off a swing that you probably saw happened. And your father dies trying to build a slide for you on your birthday. Absolutely traumatizing. Sven was born in 1918 and died in 1964. I give it a 1 for creativity, because the death wasn't on screen and we only hear about it from Edie telling us it happened. I give it a 4 for truthfulness, because if Edith didn't tell us that Sven died by a dragon-shaped slide, some may have thought an actual dragon killed him, like Edie always said. Calvin. Calvin, the twin who had big aspirations, like being an astronaut, and reached for the stars, literally. When he was playing on a swing trying to do a full loop around, the wind picked up, causing the swing to snap, and launch Calvin off the edge, plummeting into the rocks or drowning in the sea. Calvin was born in 1950, and died in 1961. I give it a 3 on the sadness scale, because Calvin had dreams, and kept promises. Such as not eating another mushroom for the rest of his life. He did not eat another mushroom. His childhood dream was to make a full loop on the swing, and he did it. I give this a 3 for creativity. Calvin's death is pretty obvious. He died from falling off the swing. But it wasn't as clear as Odin's death, and we actually got to see him flying through the skies, his goal. I give this a 4 for truthfulness, because he actually did fly off the cliff, even if it was an exaggeration. Barbara. A washed-up childhood star is killed by her psychotic fans who stalked her, only leaving her ear in her music box. All told in a comic. Barbara was born in 1944 and died in 1960. I give this a 1 for sadness, because the bright, comic style gives it a comedic tone. I give this a 5 on the creativity scale for the way it was told. A 5 for the truthfulness scale, because everything was true. If you remembered the beginning, it was explained that all monsters were just people in costumes. Walter. Probably one of the saddest deaths. Trying to deal with the grief of death in the family, Walter locks himself away in the basement. Edie brings down food for him to eat every once in a while, but he never talks to anyone and never leaves the basement. Every now and then, there's a train that goes by that shakes the room. However, Walter believed this was a monster, even through his adulthood. Eventually, Walter got fed up with living the same day over and over again, breaking out of the basement through a train tunnel. Little did he know, this tunnel will be the death of him. I give this a 5 on the sadness scale, just because of how depressing this one is. You see your father with a bloodied hand, telling your sister that she has to watch after you. Just hours later, you see your own sister die, knowing you cold died as well. You can't deal with the loss of your siblings, so you lock yourself away in a basement. Not seeing the light of day or spending time with family for 30 years. Not knowing of all that has changed in the world. Until one day, you become brave enough to finally break free. Only to die just minutes later. Truly heartbreaking. I give a 5 on the creativity scale, because of how they incorporated the death of a previous character into another's. I do like how considerate they were when creating the basement. And I can't get over the speech for Walter, it makes the scene so much more sad. I actually cannot set a number on the scale for truthfulness, as it's never clear what really happened to Walter. Did he commit suicide from all the grief? Did he die from a sickness due to eating the same thing over and over again, or a lack of vitamins? Did he die of shock from seeing nature and how things have changed? Or was it as simple as he was killed by a train, the thing he loved most? Well, it shows that he has hit by a train, and he treated it as if it were the sun. But some people have a problem with this, stating that the tracks had to come from an island that broke off and the train also ran under the house. Some people speculate why there was a train coming if it was heading toward a brick wall. Which isn't true, because the brick wall is a part of the tunnel, and not in the middle of the tracks, because that would mean Walter would be dead and the house would have a massive hole in the basement, because the train would run through the basement. Maybe the brick wall was just a metaphor, along with the train. So while death by a train definitely isn't out of the picture, it would just entail that from 2005 to 2017, the railroad tracks would have had to have been destroyed, only leaving the ones from the tunnel. Probably because it was Finch history, and Edie didn't want it removed. Sam died when he took his daughter, Dawn, on a hunting trip. Dawn didn't like it at first, but eventually she began to like it, until Sam shot a deer on a cliff. Which in the deer's last dying breaths, it kicked Sam off the cliff, killing Sam on impact. Sam was born in 1950 and died in 1983. I give this a 5 for sadness, because Dawn was having such a great time with her father, Sam, and it all came crashing down when a deer kicked Sam off the cliff, right in front of Dawn. I give it a 4 for creativity. Because I did like how the story was told through taking photos, and I believe they made use of the island as a hunting spot. I give it a 5 for truthfulness, because this did actually happen. Sam was kicked